So just to run you through some basic hand exercises, this is kind of what I start every morning with. And you know, these are the hands that I chose as the hands that I like to focus on because they're the ones that I'm good with. There are other hands aside from these that you'll see in other forms. This is a system designed to be kept simple, and so when you get into this and you do it long enough, you're going to find that you're more comfortable doing some things than other things. It doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't mean that you shouldn't practice the things that you're not like necessarily gaining an advantage from, because in some cases what you'll find is that stuff that you fucking hated at first will end up being really great for you after you've practiced it a little bit. Yeah, again, these are the ones that I kind of do every morning. So again, I start with that same stance, bringing up into here, going down. And I do practice my basic hands a lot of times from this training stance, which is this, you know, knees really tucked in, sunk stance that you can really feel in your legs. But if you want to start from like a more natural fighting position, which would be something more akin to this, where the feet are still kind of a little bit angled inwards and there's still a little bit of drawing in here, this is definitely still solid, but you'd see that there's a lot less strain going on. I don't recommend getting in a habit of doing this early on. This is something more advanced that you should do after you've developed the leg strength to, you know, really have a reliable grasp on that foundation, because otherwise things may end up feeling weird. You may end up developing some bad habits. So anyway, hands go up into a double Wu Sao. Double Wu can be this, double Wu can be this, it can be this. All it means is a guarding hand. It means that you have an outer gate here and an inner gate here. You want to keep stuff out of your outer gate. If it gets through your outer gate, you keep it out with your inner gate. If that makes any sense. And both are protecting the center line. Elbows are dropped, protecting your sides here. And I feel ideally that inner gate hand should be up here around the face and throat, and that outer gate hand should be angled towards the face of your opponent. This just makes it easier to come up into a punch, into a strike, and it also just sets you at an advantageous position to do a bunch of hands. So with that being said, I'll start out with just a basic punch. The hands cycle one over the other. So as this one goes out, it drops, and then this one comes up over the top. You don't want to get into a habit of like bicycling. You want to throw straight out, drop, straight out, drop, straight out, drop, straight out, drop, straight out, drop. The next thing that I'll do is a shifting burst. So we do these things called chain punches. When we get into a guard of somebody, we want to throw a lot of punches to strike them as many times as we can with that opening. Which is one of the techniques that we'll use to set somebody off balance. So if somebody gives us a little tiny opening and we're able to get in with one punch, and then that opening widens after that one punch, we can throw a second and a third and fourth, fifth, and we can just walk them back. That's Wing Chun. That's essentially how our system works. We want to set them off balance. And so these bursts are kind of an important part early on in kind of conceptualizing that, and a very useful tool to novices. So when we shift, we're dropping our weight into one leg. We're keeping the weight kind of 60-40. So I still have weight on my front leg, but I can lift this without compromising my structure, and that's very important for kicks. So when I do this, I'm going to shift, and I'm going to throw 3 punches. So that's one of the things that you would see in a normal basic hand set. One of our other basic hands coming up here is a Tan Da. Tan Sao is this. Comes up over the center line and is used with a shift to push an attack off while we step off the line. Part of that shift is that if somebody's throwing a punch here and we shift, that punch is now going here. So we're moving. That's a main part to this, is that when you're shifting and you're doing these movements, is you're moving off the line of attack while you're throwing up an insurance hand to kind of make sure that that doesn't come around and hit you while throwing your own strike. So that's a tan da. This is the tan, this is the da. So you would go and again, you want to make sure that when you do that tan, that it's on the center. You can do this at different heights, like protecting the torso, protecting the neck, protecting the head. But you always want to make sure that that's on the center line. You'll never see a tan out here. That breaks the structure. And actually, this is not very strong, whereas you'll feel a difference when it's down the center line. It's very, very strong. The next one would be a gan, which is this cleaving hand, this lower cleaving hand. This is to cover from like uppercuts, things coming down to the body. And this is a little bit of a harder hand. You want to maintain the wrist on the center, but you also want to make sure that this is coming around the front. If you're doing this over here, you can see that my center line is exposed here. But this is going to be a gan da. So gan da. That's another one. Another one would be biu da. Biu is one of the few hands that comes off the center, and it looks like this. This is a hand that a lot of people would use to defend against wide strikes, something like a hook hand or something like that. It's also an eye strike, which is why I like it, because this is one of those things that you can just throw into somebody's face and it's just like, ugh, it's disruptive. And disruption is good. So, biu da, biu da, biu da, biu da, biu da. You can see that little snap in my wrist. That's from that relaxation. And then we have a hand called a pak, which is just a slap going out. This isn't energy that you would hit with, so I don't want you to imagine like breaking a brick with it. I want you to imagine like giving someone a quick slap in the face with it. And that just is a hand that goes out towards the center. It can either go out to your center, like how I do it here, or it can go out to your opponent's center. So if you're shifting, you can throw it this way as well. This is also a disruptive hand. One of these thrown really hard is painful to take, and it's also something that carries a lot of energy with it. And so if somebody isn't really secure with their stance, it can throw somebody off, especially if they're really stiff and the hand that you come into contact with is like connected with a badly, made foundation. Like that can really send somebody reeling. It's a really good hand to throw out. So pak da. I always try to throw these paks out at about the height of somebody's shoulder, because pretty much no matter where the impact is going, it's got to start at that shoulder. And so if I'm able to come in and throw a pak and hit that bicep, or I'm able to like hit into the shoulder area, that's good for me. That's where I want to be. You can also like naturally like target the upper arm. It's a little harder to hit that, and that's worth keeping in mind, is that you want to go for the things that are going to be a sure hit rather than something that's fancy. So again, that pak da, pak da, pak da, pak da. Practicing bong and pak is generally something that I'll do by themselves. So bong comes up over the top. The shape of the arm looks like this. You can think of this as like a 45-degree angle. I wouldn't do it any shallower than that. This is like a collapsed bong. You want it to be out. The wrist is lower than the elbow, is lower than the shoulder, generally, in classical form. But for me, since I'm kind of short, this can kind of end up coming up almost into Biu-Sao territory. And it's okay to do that, just as long as you're keeping that shoulder dropped. You just definitely want to keep the shoulder dropped in this particular hand. It will fuck you up if you don't have that happening. So, Wu-Sao here, protecting my neck. This is also an advantageous position because if I make bridge here, I can use a thing called a lop, and I can do a lop da, Bong Lap Da is a very popular way to strike. This strike here is called a Fan Sao. This is what I was trying to think of with the showing off the Sealand Tao. Starts at the shoulder. You're pulling the shoulder back, and then pulling the elbow back, and then sending that whipping energy through the forearm here, and striking usually to the throat because you're going up the arm into somebody's throat. This is, you can imagine grabbing someone's wrist in a lop, which is this thing here, which compromises structure, and then sending that hand out. Anyway, so bong, bong, bong. Bong can also be an elbow strike. So you always want to think about that elbow kind of being the barrel of a cannon, just pointing towards the opponent. And it's relaxed. Let's see a little bit of movement in that wrist as it goes. Next is going to be just a plain old pak. As opposed to keeping the pak on my center here, I'm throwing the pak at the center of my opponent. So like right in this territory here. And then the next is going to be a combination hand. When we do a thing called a quan, which is this rolling strike, we're typically doing a bong and a tan at the same time. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's always what this means. Quan means to tie up, and to tie up, it just means this motion here. Just happens to be that these two hands are advantageous to doing that. So we're throwing out a tan and a bong, and we're cycling them over one another in this motion that can be walked forward. So if somebody's, being really aggressive and we want to break their stride towards us, we can crash into them with one of these or a couple of these, and then we can use that to either, kick or to punch or do something that's going to compromise their structure. And then we have another double hand that we usually throw, which is the double gan. Gan can come out from the top too. So as tan covers us high here, if we're covering high here, we do a gan, which is this cleaving hand. And I think that gan actually translates from Cantonese into the word cleaving. And the way that we're going to do that is throw that lower gan and that upper gan at the same time. So this protects us low and it protects us high. And these are painful things to get hit with. These are relaxed. They carry all of that energy from the trunk and from that shift into that strike basically, and create this really painful thing to run into. Generally, we're doing this on a backup. So if somebody like surprises us with a sucker punch or whatever, we have our hands up already. Ideally, we're going to step back into that double gan, and then move forward with something. So anyway, that's basic hands, and yeah.